really get into the meat of this video, I want to offer a reminder that this video is not a replacement for professional medical, psychological care. If you're having intrusive thoughts, definitely let your care provider know. Even if you're like unsure if you're having intrusive thoughts, let your care provider know. I want this video to be informative and to provide an additional layer of support, but I don't want it to be a replacement for that professional support. And that goes for all the videos on here, but especially with this one. It's so important to get that professional support with something like intrusive thoughts. And if you're curious about what intrusive thoughts are, I will get into that right now. Okay, so I'll start with myself. When my son Hudson was a newborn, I had the scariest thoughts about him. I would have like very vivid thoughts of him drowning or being cut by a butcher knife. One time I was changing his diaper and I like paused with the diaper in midair because I had this visualization of he and my husband, Eric, dying in a car crash. And in that moment, I was there. I felt what it would feel like to lose them. And I started crying and it was awful. These thoughts did not come every day, but they came often enough that I had to build up walls. I had to figure out ways to push them aside, to avoid them. A lot of times I would use like heavy duty distraction, like, no, I'm not going to go there. After a while, the distractions got too exhausting and less effective, and I saw a therapist. And she helped me find a balance between running from the nightmares and allowing them to just swallow me whole. And she also helped me recognize that feeling like something horrible was going to happen did not mean that thing was actually going to happen. It was not some kind of prophecy or anything like that. It was just a false thought triggered by, the fact that my newborn was so vulnerable and that I was almost entirely responsible for his well-being. And she offered lots of techniques that were really helpful. I'm going to go over those techniques in the follow-up video to this one, so be sure to watch that if you're curious. And according to my therapist, what I experienced was actually pretty mild. Some women get so buried in these nightmarish thoughts that they can barely function. But if that's what you're experiencing, it is not your fault, and there's something to be done about it. So with the intrusive thoughts I had, it was more just about bad things happening to my baby, but not about me inflicting that harm. But for some moms or some parents, those thoughts are composed of them they see themselves intentionally harming their baby. And that specifically is like the definition for intrusive thoughts, when you're thinking about harming your baby. But it's so important to remember that most people that report intrusive thoughts, they don't actually want to harm their baby. They're just having vivid thoughts of doing so, and these thoughts horrify them. They have these thoughts and they feel awful because it's not at all something that they want to do or that they're going to follow through with. These thoughts just come into their head. And these thoughts can become really frightening when the parent is doing something like bathing the child or driving in a car with them or in the kitchen with knives and, partaking in any activities that could pose any potential risk. And it can cause an almost constant state of paranoia and really, really taxing efforts to never lose control. And for obvious reasons, this is an experience that most parents never tell anyone about. But what many don't realize is that these intrusive thoughts are so incredibly common, but you wouldn't know because most people don't talk about it. But there was a really interesting, really helpful study published in BMC Psychiatry, and it found that between 70 and of new mothers reported these unwanted intrusive thoughts of infant-related harm. And half of all new mothers have intrusive thoughts about harming their infant on purpose. So again, it's so much more common than we realize, the intrusive thoughts that I had, and even the intrusive thoughts of you inflicting the harm. And these thoughts do not make us monsters. They are just a sign that you are experiencing an incredibly treatable psychological condition. And any mental health specialist worth their salt will absolutely not report you, as long as you can honestly say that you find these thoughts disturbing and that you recognize that they are never anything you would actually want to follow through with. They're purely just thoughts. You don't like them, you don't want them anymore. That is the sign that you're good in regards to not being a harm to your baby. And we'll get to what it means for the people that don't realize that these thoughts are wrong. But if you realize that they're wrong and disturbing, then you'll be okay with professional support. Okay, so when these intrusive thoughts become really constant and impact your ability to function, it's often a sign of postpartum obsessive compulsive disorder, which is so much more common, again, than many realize. This can manifest as obsessive attempts to suppress the intrusive thoughts, even like partaking in obsessive rituals, like never leaving the baby's side, praying all the time, what else? Avoiding any triggering situations, like driving the car with your baby, bathing the baby, anything like that. And not surprisingly, OCD, it's been connected with issues with serotonin regulation and an elevated level of oxytocin, which are two hormones impacted during pregnancy and the postpartum period. So it's not surprising that postpartum OCD is pretty common. And it can also be triggered by incredibly stressful situations and a rapid increase in responsibility, which obviously are two things that happen when you have a new baby, right? So the whole situation is ripe for postpartum OCD. And because of these factors, some mental health specialists believe that slight OCD tendencies might just be a normal byproduct of the postpartum experience. But of course, if you're experiencing that, you don't want to feel that way, right? Just because it's probably totally normal doesn't mean that you shouldn't receive support so you can move through that and actually be able to enjoy these early days of your baby's life. With that said, these intrusive thoughts are a very big issue when it is a symptom of postpartum psychosis. So this condition usually consists of having the inclination to harm the baby, extreme paranoia, hallucinations and delusions, sleep disturbances, and disorientation. This typically presents within a week of baby's birth, and unlike a condition like postpartum OCD, those with postpartum psychosis don't realize that they shouldn't be having these thoughts. Their delusions are telling them, yes, this is a normal thought. This is something that you should do. And it is something that requires immediate treatment. It is very serious. Okay, if you have any questions about any of these very heavy topics that I just went over, please let me know in the comments below. And the number one thing to do if you're experiencing this is contact your medical care provider. That is my number one suggestion. But I have additional suggestions that can be added support. They're not a substitute for the professional support, but they can add to it. And all of those suggestions will be in the next video that will be posted after this one.